Josh, why are you wearing a scarf?
No, I had a mark. It's no big deal. Don't worry about it.
Is that a hickey?
Yeah, we'll go with that.
I want to get some garlic nuts.
Wait, no. Something else. No, I don't feel like I'm allergic. I don't feel like to eat it. Let's have Chinese.
It's got garlic in it too.
Welcome to the iFanboy, the comic book discussion show. My name is Connor Kilpatrick, and that is...
I'm Ron Richards.
And this is...
You're doing movie phone guy again, aren't you?
No, I'm just doing loud talking.
I'm Josh Flanagan.
I'm projecting to the back of the room.
So, unless you've been under a rock.
Oh, God.
I know. Vampires. The vampires are everywhere.
A hot trend these past 5 years.
Yeah, the Twilight, the True Blood, these kind of things. There's about 800 shows, a bunch of books, things like that.
They love the vampires.
Vampire Diaries.
Yeah.
And since we do a comic book show and we want people to watch it, why not hop on the trend? The thing is, while there are many, many vampires in comics, they're not really following a trend. Vampires have been around in comics forever.
Going all the way back to the EC horror 50s comics, I mean, vampires
Dracula and Marvel in the 70s
While
has been around.
vampires have always been in comics, there's certainly more of them now since the trend has
yes. But the thing
true.
is like, and we're going to talk about it a little bit, but when the X-Men run up against vampires, it's not unheard of because they've done it before.
It's always been around.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
And vampires have often been, we're going to talk about some of the more interesting uses of vampires or stuff like that, but vampirism has been present in comics.
Even back to Captain America, he fought that vampire dude in the Invaders, whose name I can't remember.
Yeah.
Lord something.
Lord.
I know, I can picture it.
He looks like a bat.
Fanged.
Yeah. Good stuff.
Lord something.
Yeah. Anyway,
He likes to suck the blood.
But so now, so of course Twilight comes out. We're not going to talk about the Twilight graphic novels because did you see the
lettering?
Did you see the lettering on those?
I had prepared a whole Edward versus other guy argument.
It would be awesome if he had a shirt on right now.
He goes, Team Jacob. Yeah.
Is it Jacob?
But
Edward versus Jacob.
I'm not touching on Twilight, but one of the good byproducts of this whole vampire trend the past couple years is that there's actually been some pretty good stuff.
Yes.
So.
The best thing right now that involves vampires, I think, is American Vampire from Vertigo.
Clearly titled.
Yes. You know what you're in for.
Quite upfront.
Scott Snyder, and this is the first collection which is written with Scott Snyder and Stephen King, with art by Rafael Albuquerque. It's an ongoing series. It's happening now.
Which, forget the vampires. Rafael Albuquerque.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
Fantastic.
But it's a great vampire story, and you're not... Josh is a guy who will say, I'm not getting involved in that trend, but you love...
vampires.
You love them.
I'm that guy?
You don't like stuff that's trends?
All right, no, that's fine. Well, this is important to say right from the beginning. Sometimes when you look at something and you say, "Oh, this is about that thing," I don't want to watch a movie about boxing.
Right.
The movie's not about boxing. The comic
is
not
boxing vampires.
The comic is not about vampires.
Right.
The vampires are a way to tell a different story, and this is a story of America. It is actually, and it's American Vampire. It takes place throughout American history. It starts off in 1920s America and Hollywood.
Well, no, it starts off in the Old West.
That's true.
Yeah.
Well, that's the backup, so it sort of does it at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is fine.
If you take the historical timeline, it starts off in the Old West in the 1920s and 1930s.
It still tells the story of America,
Yes.
and vampires are sort of a metaphor for sort of like the old European way of doing things. Or there are some of the vampires, and then there are new American vampires, and then there are the rest of everybody else who has to be around. And vampires are really this interesting thing because as we go through all these, you're going to notice that there's a million ways to tell that story, and it's the same way all those TV shows and things you're seeing are doing it differently. One of the things that's I talked to Scott Snyder about this. You can listen to the podcast on iFanboy.com. These vampires are scary.
Yes.
These are not vampires that you kind of have a crush on. These are vampires
They're not broody.
Yeah.
No,
they're twinkly.
No, they're not twinkly at all. They're scary, and you would do well to avoid them. You wouldn't think, oh, I can turn this one.
Yeah.
These are vampires and creatures that you don't want around you, but also they're running things too.
They're in charge.
They have money, they have power, they have political influence, and things like that. It's a really nice story on a macro level and on a micro level. Yeah. Really well done. It's
gotten rave reviews.
But
it's really done.
The thing is, it's not about vampires, but vampires are in the title. They're important. Mm-hmm. Vampires themselves are interesting. I mean, they are. There's a lot of things going on. We're talking about metaphors for America. Vampires there's so many metaphors within vampires for sex, for the forbidden.
This sort of struggling with your humanity, doing the right thing as opposed to obeying your base, desires and things like that. And that's at the heart of what a vampire is. Really, it's like, what are you as a human? Like, are you going to be? Are you
the pure id?
Yes.
You want that thing, you're going to take that thing.
Because you have the power to do so. Yeah. And whether you're
you'll never age, and you'll...
Yeah, it's almost like everything
you... It's much of a curse as it is a blessing.
Yeah. Look at us
that on the back of the book.
Anyway.
Ron iFanboy.
It says the book's a curse. Wait,
speaking
that's
of
a terrible quote.
Speaking of curses, a current...
well, no, it just ended.
Well, yeah, it was a storyline, a current happening in the X-Men universe. They recently launched a new adjective-less X-Men title.
With the old logo.
With the old logo, which is awesome. And it got a little blowback because it was basically the first story arc was written by Victor Gischler with art by Paco Medina.
Yep.
And the story arc basically was it's called Curse of the Mutants, and it pits X-Men versus vampires.
Yep.
Now people freaked out because they're like, oh, it's
jumping on the train,
stuff like that. As I mentioned earlier, there's a long history of the X-Men and
Dracula, Morbius. That guy you were talking about.
An X-Men thing.
I know, but Marvel.
With Marvel, but X-Men specifically tussled with Dracula. Storm got bit, became one of Dracula's servants. That sort of thing. So there is a history there. That said, this has been a fantastic start to
I've been reading it. I've been enjoying it too.
And what made it really interesting is that they took the whole vampire thing, and what I see, my observation of what's going on with the vampire trend is that they're taking the stereotype of vampire that we know and finding ways to turn it and make it a little different and things like that. So within the X-Men, what they did was they introduced all these sects of vampires, and Dracula led them, and Dracula's son, took out Dracula and usurped. It was a coup, and it was so a very political angle. But then they also got very modern in terms of that they infected most of San Francisco by igniting a blood bomb.
So it was basically it was a suicide bomber.
Yeah, which infected everyone in Union Square, which spread through San Francisco and had San Francisco turn into a bunch of vampires. Really clever
Hippie
kind
vampires.
of the worst crunchy vampires, but really clever kind of thing.
What does that smell?
And there were so many twists and turns and action, and it was a lot of fun and what you would expect from a superhero.
Well,
vampire
the trick when you want to take advantage of the trend, which is what they do. I mean, it's how people make money in business is to make it interesting. Don't just make it hacky, which some books maybe later on we'll talk about. This is an interesting story. American Vampire is an interesting story.
Exactly, and stemming also out of the X-Men universe, a couple of years ago we had the great Captain Britain run by Paul Cornell and Leonard Kirk, where Dracula was the main villain, which involved Dracula having a foothold.
And Blade was a member of the team.
Blade was a member of the team, but Dracula having a foothold on the moon and invading and made it like cosmic, which was great.
Vampire missiles.
Yeah, vampire missiles.
Missiles.
So like it's taking these things.
It's the same Dracula.
No.
Well, that's the little thing.
Because that was the thing. If we're going to talk about Captain Britain, is that you flip that page to reveal Dracula, and you're like, oh, it's 70s Dracula.
Yeah, exactly.
And he's got
this was like Gary Oldman Dracula.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but what are you gonna do? But interestingly enough, Victor Gischler, who wrote the X-Men, is a author. He's doesn't do a lot of comic work, similar to Stephen King. With American Vampire.
It's funny because it's so flexible. Like if you think about the sort of trends, what are the trends? Like there was the gorilla trend.
Yeah.
There's the zombie trend. There's all those things. But the vampire is so much.
It's a timeless trend.
It's also so much more flexible.
Yeah.
Like you can do so many different things with it. And then when you look in the Marvel universe, like the way that Paul Cornell wrote Dracula was that he was based on
the buffoonish 70s.
But based on centuries of acquired knowledge, he was a brilliant military tactician.
Yes. Yeah.
Like he would have to, and that was the angle that he took on him. That's how he launched this attack on the Earth, and he isolated Britain. And he was going to start by taking that over, and that was really interesting to me.
And and so in both in Captain Britain and in X-Men, they've worked in Blade, who is Marvel's resident vampire hunter.
He's a daywalker.
He's a daywalker with a big mustache now, and
is his hair still all messed up?
But unfortunately, he didn't really get he had a good run of an ongoing series recently. It got canceled, I think, before its time. A lot of people would say, but he's that kind of that role of basically the Slayer, similar to Buffy.
Mm-hmm. Well, it was Spitfire.
She was a vampire, but not as a Slayer. I mean, I'm saying that Slayer trope.
She was hiding it.
So Blade was a very popular character amongst the people who enjoyed that Slayer kind of trope. Spun off to movies. There was the short-lived TV show, but it is that kind of one Van Helsing kind of character, which an empire has been built around Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Right. Which is a huge comic for Dark Horse Comics.
Exactly. I mean, so those who don't know, Buffy, unless you live under a rock, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Joss Whedon creation, originally was a movie with Christy Swanson and Luke Perry, which is very underrated. Donald Sutherland.
Pee Wee Herman.
I enjoy that movie very much.
Pee Wee Herman.
But then it was resuscitated in the late '90s as a TV show with Sarah Michelle Gellar. Went for 7 seasons, which I just finished. recently, and it was awesome. And then they picked up 5 years later with season 8 in the comics.
Wasn't it when it first launched? It was a top 10 book. I think.
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
the very
it was.
beginning,
Yeah,
it was
yeah,
top 10 book.
yeah, it was. And
3 years later, it was what?
Yeah, 40 issues later. It's a little long in the tooth, but I gotta admit, after watching all 7 seasons, this comic totally makes more sense, and it's awesome. And I love Spike, who is the vampire.
But we just talked.
Yeah.
I mean, Dracula. Dracula had a great arc in Buffy. It was actually one, maybe the best arc in the entire season 8 run was where they had this big war. And Dracula came and helped them out. He was hilarious.
That was awesome. Yeah, it was, and Xander became Dracula's
You can
slave.
play with these tropes and you can play with these. Like Dracula is a character that shows up in a lot of these because he's a open.
He's the
I was gonna say
vampire.
open source character, but he's
Yeah.
He's a
I think
Public domain.
Public domain.
I think a
character.
lot of Buffy's success too. It's played with a lot of what you said earlier about doing the right thing and the will versus the doing the right thing versus what the bloodlust says.
Right.
The kind of thing. And you get that with Angel and with Spike and stuff like that. But Buffy's success also expanded into the demon territory and into the occult and less more just about vampires.
But she was always the
and
vampire
musicals.
slayer.
Yeah, exactly. The musical.
Well, they called her Slayer. Actually, there's another book out right now that I just remembered now about vampires. Dracula, the Company of Monsters that Boom puts out.
Oh, yeah.
By
That
Kirby
Busiek, he plots it.
Yeah.
There's another writer, and there's
He just gets on the phone once every couple of months.
it's actually it's another take. It's a super rich guy at a company who wants to take vampire blood to make himself
There's another
immortal.
one. There's another one from Top Cow that's about the Impaler.
Yeah,
Vlad's
Impaler.
Impaler, who's
Yeah.
Dracula too.
And,
So.
and American Vampire is very similar to Turf, which is Jonathan Ross and Tommy Lee Edwards, 1920s kind of aliens, vampire, gangster kind of
Vampires
thing.
are a timeless. I mean,
They
people
are.
complain about it now. Oh, there's always been vampires comics. Always. Always multiple ones. And Dracula's always been around. It's a timeless character, and to complain about it to me seems silly.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take you back now to Vertigo of Yore, or not Yore. This is a book. This is how old they are. Is that I dug them out and they were all bagged and boarded and taped.
Vertigo
And if you
X.
know anything about me now, that was a long time ago. I'm just wanna look at
2003.
2003. This is Blood and Water by Judd Winnick, doing his own sort of creator-owned series for Vertigo, and Tom Coker. This is a story, sort of a modern take on vampires. It took place in San Francisco, and it starts off with the main character has hepatitis A, B, whichever.
A.
He's gonna die. He looks pregnant. He's got this big bloated
got a thing on his
belly
liver
thing
and
going
he's gonna
on.
die.
And his friends sort of give him a proposition that they can save him, but they don't really tell him
What the price?
what the price is, and it's that they can turn him into a vampire.
Would
And-
that heal the tumor,
Yes.
or
Yes,
do you
it
just
would,
keep
yeah.
the tumor around
Oh,
and
that's
they
a
just wouldn't
good
be?
No, it heals him.
It heals it.
It
There
is.
you
That's
go.
the
There's
point.
the answer. So-
And it's all this story about there's sort of this intermingling of disease and the idea that, because that's another take that you can go with vampires. There's the
it's a disease.
question of will thing,
Yeah.
and then there's the bloodborne disease aspect
Yeah.
of it. And so there's allegories in here to with HIV and AIDS and those
Yep.
kinds of things.
Infection, yeah.
And sort of what it would mean today, and it's so sexy and cool to be a vampire and all that stuff. And
Well, sexy. You got Preacher, another Vertigo book where it's not about vampires, but one of the main characters is a vampire.
this is my favorite vampire in all
Not
of
too sexy,
comics.
though.
No.
Yeah, a little more hard edge.
It depends on what you like.
Yeah.
It depends
If
on
you
what
like
you
rough
like.
trade,
So Cassidy, the Irish vampire, with the sleeveless jean jacket.
The Irish were not known as paragons of.
Style.
what's funny about him is he's a vampire, and there's all kinds of fantastical things in Preacher, but it's not like it's a vampire story.
It's not.
It
It's
is
not
a
a vampire. It's a story that happens to have a vampire.
But he's a
which
very
shows how-
straightforward vampire.
Yeah.
He's got slightly super strength. He needs to drink blood. He can't be in the sun.
Yep. And
He
he's
has.
a bastard.
Yeah, but that almost has more to do with he's just
Himself. Yeah.
sort of himself, but he's just been around so long and life's been so shitty. I love, like, there's an issue where they reveal his girlfriend.
Yeah.
And like they met in the 60s and fell in love, so they were both like flower children kind of, but she got old and he didn't. And that's his great sadness,
Yeah.
is that
He's got kind of Robert Pattinson hair.
Well, I was gonna say
outlives all
actually
his
there's a
friends.
lot of similarity between Spike from Buffy and Cassidy. I
Well, if
mean, I
you
think
look
there's a
at-
lot of inspiration there. I think.
If you
So-
look at Cassidy, and he wants to be a good guy, but he knows he's not, and that's his thing that's going on. He's self-destructive. To me, when you look, you talk about his jean jacket, but he's a guy who's been around since the Irish Revolution,
Yeah.
and like it's like he got stuck at some point in the '60s looking like a roadie. Like that became his look,
Yeah.
that became his thing. And it's
timeless.
tragic.
Yeah,
It's
it's-
really tragic. And I've
clothes are
always said,
tragic?
well, no, his story. I've always said that Preacher is actually Cassidy's story.
Yeah.
His arc is actually the main thing throughout the whole thing. We did a show about this. We talked about it before.
Yeah.
But that's just another use. And there's no reason for a vampire to be in this book.
God, I want to reread Preacher.
Yes, you
Yeah,
do.
you
I
should.
really do.
should.
There's,
do.
Well, we talk about all these great books, and I think the thing that gets people annoyed with trends is when the books come out that aren't taking advantage of the story well and come off as hacky.
Yeah.
And
Sack.
or as not as hacky but as exploitative. And I think one of those books is Ultimate Avengers
Whatever
3.
it's called now.
I think
Ultimate
it's 3.
Comics Avenger, Ultimate Comics,
I
Ultimate
think it's
Avengers,
the third
Ultimate number
miniseries.
3. Yeah.
It's written by Mark Miller, drawn by Steve Dillon.
But you would think, I mean, it's a good pedigree.
And it's about vampires attacking superheroes, and it comes off as just very sort of exploitative, and
Yeah.
that's why people get annoyed. None of these stories I would call exploitative. I'd call them all good stories that utilize the vampire character or medium or whatever you want to call it. But I think I tried at that book. It just seemed very sort of
And then-
shove vampires down into the story.
And then you've got the things like IDW has the license of doing True Blood comics, which, you know, to me, I'm not a True Blood fan, so I don't see it as exploitative. I just see it as a book I don't care about because I don't read True Blood. But for a True Blood fan, it's in canon.
Probably sell more than anything else they
Exactly,
have.
yeah. It's in canon. It's done by the people who are doing the TV show, the writers, you know, maybe. And the thing is, with those licensed books, as we know very much, it can either go really, really highbrow and good, or it can just get it out because we know they'll buy it. And, you know,
Which would you say it is?
No comment.
Well, that speaks volumes. So,
And I think that's where people get annoyed is when they show up in.
I
books
only read
where-
the first one. I didn't.
yeah, I didn't even bother.
Don't worry, it's okay.
It's okay.
Anyway.
Was it?
We'll be
But,
was it
okay.
but so vampires, they've
And I
been
like
around
the
for a
show.
while. They're going to be around way past this trend is over. Hopefully, the Twilight adaptations get a little better with the lettering.
Because that's what comics fans are. That's what the casual reader.
It's important.
Casual readers don't give a.
Anyway, so if I'm sure there are
don't know how
vampires
bad it
out
is.
there. I'm sure there are vampires out there that you guys enjoy that we didn't mention. So shoot us an email. Let us know which ones that you want us to hear about or we should check out. You can email us at contact@ifanboy.com, or you can call the voicemail line at 1-888-FANBOYS. It's 1-888-326-2697. Or on ifanboy.com, there's going to be a post about this episode. Talk there. Argue vampires. What do we get wrong? What do we get right?
Baron Blood.
Nice.
Very
Wow.
good. Very good. Nice.
What?
Nice.
Bravo.
I lowbotted it.
Very good. Very, very good.
Are you?
You're not supposed to offer it. That's weird.
Are you hungry? What are you looking at right next?
So at ifanboy.com, we have a whole post there. There's also
pale.
other great stuff. There's other great articles and things you can read throughout the week. And our weekly Pick of the Week podcast comes out every Sunday night. It's an audio podcast where we talk about comics such as X-Men.
You could have heard us talk about this originally, or the other ones.
Exactly. And you can follow us at twitter.com/ifanboy, get links to all the cool stuff, and just general, you know, see what Josh is going to tweet incorrectly. And, you know, it's always a good time. So,
iFanboy is member supported.
yes.
If you want to contribute and make this happen because it's an important part of your comic reading life and comic books are an important part of your overall life or undead life. That's lame. Go to ifanboy.com/store. There's all sorts of prizes and stuff that you can get for being a member. That's the only way you can get them. We give away all sorts of good stuff.
Yep.
We know people who know people.
Yes. So become a member.
I'm
Awesome.
just saying I'm very pale. I don't like to go in the sun.
A high collar.
I like a steak. I like a medium rare.
Spikes
It's
my
supposed to be good for your skin.
Yeah.
Blood.
Really?
Queens and kings used to use it in the Middle Ages. So
Oh, well, they knew everything about me. You feeling sick? Bleed him.
No, it's getting weird.